6 months had passed since humanity joined the galactic community. The results were not what anyone expected. On the ice world of Cryo 7, where 3 other alien colonies had frozen to death within weeks, humans had built a city of 50,000 people. The children born there were healthier than those on Earth. Somehow they had adapted to the terrible cold. Commander Tejo stood on the space station above New Incheon. Below him, the human settlement sparkled like diamonds against the endless white ice. Steam rose from power plants that humans had built using simple technology. They were turning the planet's natural heat into electricity. "Sir, we have another visitor request," said Ensign Kang. "The Valdorian trade group wants to see how we're surviving down there." Tejo smiled grimly. It was the 5th request this week. Alien species kept coming to see the impossible. Humans were not just surviving, but doing well on worlds that had killed everyone else who tried to live there. On the planet's surface, Dr. So Young was making a discovery that would change everything. She had been studying the human children born on Cryo 7. She wanted to understand why they seemed so healthy despite the harsh conditions. What she found in their blood samples made her call an emergency meeting. "The radiation levels here should have killed us all within months," she explained to the colony leaders in the meeting hall. "But our children aren't just surviving the radiation, they're using it. Their bodies have learned to turn it into energy." Colony Administrator Park leaned forward. "Are you saying the radiation is making them stronger?" "I'm saying human biology is changing at a rate that should be impossible," So Young replied. "These children can see better in the dark. They need less food. They can work in conditions that would kill their parents. We're not just surviving here. We're becoming something new." Meanwhile, on the desert world of searing sands, another human colony was facing different challenges. The planet's twin suns created heat that melted most metals during the day. Night brought cold that froze the air itself. 3 previous attempts at colonization had ended with all colonists dead within days. The humans had been there for 4 months, and were not just alive. They were expanding. They had learned to build underground during the day and work on the surface at night. Their farms produced food using recycled water and minerals taken from the sand itself. General Quan Ho of the Hegemony military arrived to inspect the human settlements. He was certain he would find them barely staying alive. Instead, he found something that disturbed him deeply. The humans were building not just homes and farms, but factories and research centers. "How is this possible?" he demanded of the human colony leader, Governor Sung-min. "Your species has no special abilities. Your technology is basic, yet you succeed where others have failed completely." Sung-min offered the alien general some tea. The gesture was oddly calming despite Quan Ho's frustration. "General, I think you're looking at this wrong. We don't have special abilities, but we have something else. We don't give up." "That cannot be enough," Quan Ho insisted, "can't it?" Sung-min walked to the window of his office. He looked out at human workers building new structures in the harsh desert. "My grandfather survived a war that killed millions. My mother grew up during a famine and still became a doctor. I spent my youth in poverty and became an engineer. Every human here has a story like that. We're used to impossible situations." That night, Quan Ho sent a disturbing report to his superiors. The humans weren't just surviving through luck. They were deliberately taking the worst situations and turning them into advantages. This wasn't natural. This was dangerous. On the poisonous world of Venom Falls, where the very air killed most species within hours, humans had been living for 3 months. They had built enclosed cities connected by sealed tunnels, but that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was that some humans were beginning to work outside without full protective suits. Dr. Chang Ho, the colony's chief medical officer, couldn't believe his own test results. Some of the colonists were developing immunity to the planet's poisons. Their bodies were processing toxins that should have been instantly fatal. "This is impossible," he muttered to his assistant, Nurse Yunji. "Human biology doesn't work this way. We can't adapt this quickly." "Maybe we're not normal humans anymore," Yunji suggested quietly. "Maybe living on these worlds is changing us into something new." The reports from all the human colonies were creating panic among the galactic powers. Species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years were watching newcomers succeed where they had failed. Worse, the humans seemed to be getting stronger, not weaker from the harsh conditions. In the Zephyrian Empire's war rooms, military leaders gathered around displays showing human colony locations. Admiral Veltar, the Empire's chief strategist, pointed to the growing red dots representing human settlements. They're not just surviving, he told the assembled officers. They're expanding. At this rate, they'll control half the rim worlds within 5 years. How is this our problem? Asked General Thex. Let them have the worthless worlds. We control the valuable systems. Because the worthless worlds are becoming valuable, Veltar replied grimly. The humans are getting resources from planets we thought were empty. They're finding ways to make hostile environments productive. What happens when they decide they want better worlds? The meeting fell silent. The same thought was occurring to all of them. If humans could do well on impossible worlds, what could they do with good ones? Back on Earth, the news from the colonies was creating excitement and worry in equal measure. President Moon called an emergency session of the Global Council. Our people aren't just surviving out there, she reported. They're becoming something we've never seen before. The children born on these worlds are stronger, smarter, and more adaptable than any humans in history. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Asked the representative from the African Union. I don't know, President Moon admitted, but I know we can't stop it. Our colonists are changing and there's no going back. On Nexus Station, Elder Hyejin read the reports with growing certainty. The ancient prophecy was happening exactly as written. The humans were adapting to conditions that should have been impossible. They were becoming something new and powerful. She tried once more to warn the Galactic Council, but they dismissed her concerns. They're just lucky, the council president declared. Or perhaps they're lying about how well they're doing. Hyejin left the meeting with heavy hearts. The galaxy's leaders were making the same mistakes civilizations had made for millions of years. They were not taking humanity seriously, and just like the prophecy predicted, that mistake would cost them everything. In the rim worlds, human colonies continued to grow and do well. They were becoming something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that turned disadvantages into strengths, a species that made homes in hell itself, a species that grew stronger under pressure. The strange reports kept coming in. Human children playing outside in radiation that would kill adult aliens. Human workers mining in heat that melted steel. Human farmers growing crops in soil that was pure poison to other species. Each report made the galactic powers more nervous. These humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to struggle and eventually ask for help or better worlds. Instead, they were thriving in conditions that no one else could even survive. The elders had been right to warn the stars. Humanity was unstoppable, but more than that, they were becoming something beyond what anyone had imagined. They weren't just surviving the galaxy's worst worlds. They were making those worlds into something better. And that terrified everyone who thought they understood how the universe worked. 2 years after the first attacks, the galaxy looked very different. What had started as humanity's desperate fight for survival had become something much bigger. The news of human victories had inspired dozens of species to rise up against their oppressors. Fleet Admiral Sunmi stood on the bridge of the Liberation, the flagship of what was now called the Free Worlds Alliance. Around her, the bridge crew included not just humans, but Keth navigators, Valdorian engineers, and even some former Zephyrian defectors who had grown sick of their empire's endless wars. Admiral, we're receiving signals from the Sigma Draconis system, reported Lieutenant Commander Yunsuk. 3 more worlds want to join the alliance. Sunmi smiled. It seemed impossible that she had once been a cargo ship captain, moving goods between Earth's colonies. The war had changed everything, including her. Signal back that we'll send a protection fleet within the week. No one fights alone anymore. The Free Worlds Alliance had grown from a desperate human alliance into something the galaxy had never seen. It was a voluntary union of species working together as equals, but it was humanity's unique approach to warfare and diplomacy that held it all together. On the industrial world of Forge Prime, Colonel Haiyan Wu was training the Alliance's newest military units. Humans worked alongside former slaves from a dozen different species. They were all united by a simple idea. Everyone deserved freedom. The key to human tactics isn't our weapons or our technology, he explained to a mixed group of recruits. It's that we adapt. When the enemy expects us to retreat, we attack. When they expect us to attack, we disappear. We make them fight our war, not theirs. A young Keth soldier raised a tentacle. But Colonel, how do we learn to think like humans? Hyunwoo grinned. You don't. You learn to think like yourselves, but with human stubbornness. Your species are natural pilots, so you become fighter aces who never give up. The Valdorians are master engineers, so you build weapons that keep working when everything else fails. Everyone contributes what they do best. The Alliance military was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of trying to make everyone fight the same way, humans encouraged each species to develop their own strengths while working toward common goals. Meanwhile, on Earth, President Daun was dealing with a problem no human leader had ever faced before. Earth had become the unofficial capital of a galactic revolution. Representatives from hundreds of worlds were arriving daily. "Ma'am, the Andromedan delegation is requesting military support against the hegemony occupation," reported her chief of staff. "The Spiral Arm Liberation Front wants to coordinate attacks on Zephyrian supply lines, and the Elder Council is asking for another meeting about the ancient prophecies." Daun rubbed her temples. She had been a provincial governor before the war, focused on managing farming communities and small cities. Now she was making decisions that affected entire star systems. "Schedule them all," she decided. "But make sure the Elder Council meeting is private. I want to understand these prophecies they keep mentioning." The meeting with Elder He-Jin took place in a secure conference room beneath the presidential palace. The ancient being looked even more fragile than she had 2 years ago, but her eyes still burned with urgent intelligence. "President Da-Yun, your species is fulfilling the prophecy exactly as it was written," He-Jin began without ceremony. "But you need to understand what that truly means." "Everyone keeps mentioning these prophecies," Daun replied, "but no one will explain them clearly." He-Jin activated a display showing symbols carved in crystal. This was written by the architects, a species that vanished 50 million years ago. They left warnings throughout the galaxy, but most civilizations dismissed them as myths. The symbols shifted, forming images that showed a young species spreading across the stars. The images showed both destruction and renewal. The architects called your kind the catalyst. They predicted you would appear when galactic civilization had become stagnant and corrupt, when the powerful had grown comfortable oppressing the weak. "Are you saying we were designed for this?" Daun asked. "Not designed. Prepared." The architects understood that evolution sometimes needs a push. They planted genetic markers in early human DNA, traits that would only activate under extreme pressure. He-Jin paused. "Your children who adapt to impossible worlds, your soldiers who turn defeats into victories, your diplomats who inspire others to fight for freedom. These aren't accidents. The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just lucky or stubborn. They had been shaped by an ancient civilization to be exactly what the galaxy needed when it needed it most. But the revelation came at a crucial time. The Zephyrian Empire and their allies were preparing a massive counterattack. Intelligence reports suggested they were building a fleet larger than anything in galactic history. They were determined to crush the Alliance before it could spread further. Admiral Sunmi called a war council aboard the Liberation. Representatives from 50 worlds gathered in the ship's main conference room. It was a sight that would have been impossible just 3 years earlier. "They're calling it the Great Cleansing," she reported grimly. 1,000 capital ships, 10,000 support vessels, and enough firepower to destroy entire star systems. They plan to hit all our major worlds at the same time. The room fell silent. Even with all their victories, the Alliance couldn't match that kind of firepower. "How long do we have?" asked General Thomas of the Keth Defense Force. 6 months, maybe less. Admiral Veltar of the reformed Hegemony Navy leaned forward. "My species has fought the Zephyrians for generations. I've never seen them commit this many resources to a single campaign. They're terrified of what you've created here." Colonel Hyun-woo stood up. "Good. Fear makes people make mistakes. And we've gotten very good at taking advantage of mistakes." Over the following months, the Alliance worked frantically to prepare for the coming storm. But instead of trying to match Zephyrian firepower, they did something typically human. They changed the rules of the game. On worlds across the galaxy, hidden shipyards worked around the clock-building vessels that looked like ordinary cargo ships and mining platforms. Alliance engineers, led by human innovation, had developed new weapons that could be hidden inside civilian vessels. More importantly, the Alliance had developed something the Zephyrians couldn't understand: perfect trust between species that had been enemies for generations. Human pack bonding abilities had created military units where soldiers would die for teammates they had known for months, regardless of species. The breakthrough came when Dr. So Young, now head of Alliance research, made a discovery that changed everything. While studying human genetic adaptations, She found something that made her call an emergency meeting of the Alliance leadership. The genetic markers the elders mentioned aren't just in humans, she announced to the stunned assembly. They're in every species that's joined the Alliance. Every one of you has dormant traits that activate when you work closely with humans. The evidence was overwhelming. Keth pilots working with human crews had developed reflexes impossible for their species. Valdorian engineers partnered with humans were building technology that surpassed anything either species could create alone. Even former Zephyrian defectors were showing abilities their own scientists said were impossible. We're not just fighting together, Dr. So Young concluded. We're evolving together. The discovery came just in time. Long-range sensors detected the Zephyrian armada approaching. It was a wall of ships so vast it blocked out stars. The Great Cleansing had begun. But as President Da-Un addressed the Alliance from Earth, her words carried to every world in the growing Confederation. They expect us to be afraid. They expect us to surrender or die. They don't understand that we've become something new. We're not just humans or Keth or Valdorians anymore. We're the Alliance and we don't know how to lose. The final battle for the galaxy's future was about to begin. But this time humanity wouldn't be fighting alone. They had done the impossible. They had taught the galaxy to fight like humans. The architect's prophecy was reaching its climax. The catalyst had transformed not just itself, but everyone it touched. The galaxy would never be the same again. And the Zephyrian Empire was about to discover that they hadn't just awakened humanity. They had awakened something far more dangerous. A galaxy that refused to accept oppression anymore. The Battle of the Shattered Stars lasted 3 days and changed the galaxy forever. When the Zephyrian armada arrived at the Alliance's main worlds, they expected to find desperate defenders hiding behind failing shields. Instead, they found something unprecedented in galactic warfare, an entire stellar region that had been turned into a trap. Chancellor Myung-ho, the former Earth diplomat who now led the Alliance government, watched the battle unfold from the command center on New Geneva Station. Around him, beings from dozens of species worked together with a coordination that seemed impossible just years earlier. Phase 1 complete, reported Admiral Sunmi from the Liberation. The enemy fleet has entered the Nexus system as predicted. What the Zephyrians didn't know was that the Alliance had spent months preparing for this moment. Hidden weapons platforms disguised as asteroids surrounded the system. Civilian ships that appeared to be fleeing in panic were actually carrying Alliance strike teams. Most importantly, every major Alliance world had secretly been evacuated. Their populations were spread across hundreds of hidden colonies. The Zephyrian commander, Supreme Admiral Corex, had brought enough firepower to destroy entire star systems. His ships began their bombardment with weapons that could crack planets. But as the energy beams struck their targets, something impossible happened. The planets absorbed the attacks. On the bridge of his flagship, Corex stared in disbelief at his tactical displays. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. His science officer, a being who had spent centuries studying galactic warfare, had no answers. "Sir, the energy readings make no sense. It's like the planets themselves are fighting back." What Corex couldn't see was the network of Alliance technology that had been built into the planetary crusts over the past months. Human engineering combined with Keth navigation abilities and Valdorian power systems had created something new. Worlds that could defend themselves. But the real surprise came when the fleeing civilian ships suddenly revealed their true nature. Cargo vessels opened to reveal fighter squadrons. Mining ships deployed weapons more advanced than anything in Zephyrian arsenals. Even passenger liners began launching attack drones. Admiral Jae-sung, now commanding the Alliance's first fleet, led the counterattack from his flagship Rising Phoenix. "All units, this is Phoenix Command. Show them what the Alliance has learned about warfare." The battle that followed broke every rule of galactic military science. Alliance forces didn't try to match Zephyrian firepower or follow normal tactics. Instead, they fought like humans, adapting constantly, turning every disadvantage into opportunity, and refusing to accept defeat regardless of the odds. Keth pilots, now enhanced with human determination, performed maneuvers that should have killed them. Valdorian engineers kept damaged ships fighting long after they should have been destroyed. Former hegemony forces fought, alongside their old enemies with a unity that confused and demoralized the Zephyrian troops. Colonel Hyun-woo led a boarding action against one of the Zephyrian super battleships. His team included humans, Keth, Valdorians, and even some former Zephyrian slaves who had joined the Alliance. "Remember," he told them as their assault shuttles approached the massive enemy vessel, "we're not just fighting for victory, we're fighting for the right of every being in this galaxy to be free." The boarding action became legendary throughout the Alliance. Hyunwoo's mixed species team moved through the enemy ship like they had trained together for years instead of months. Human tactical flexibility combined with alien abilities in ways that the ship's defenders couldn't counter. But the turning point of the battle came from an unexpected source. Elder Hyejin, despite her ancient age, had insisted on being present during the conflict. From her position on New Geneva Station, she accessed the deepest archives in her people's quantum crystals. "Chancellor Myung-ho," she called urgently, "I've found the rest of the prophecy, the part that was hidden until now." The display in the command center filled with ancient symbols, but now they were clearer than ever before. "The catalyst species will not just change the galaxy," Hyejin translated. "They will awaken something that has been sleeping since the architects vanished." As if responding to her words, something extraordinary began happening throughout the Nexus system. Ancient structures buried on asteroids and hidden in gas clouds began activating. Technology that had slumbered for 50 million years started coming online. The architects hadn't just left prophecies. They had left tools. Massive energy conduits emerged from hyperspace, connecting every world in the system. Ancient weapons platforms, far more advanced than anything current galactic civilization could build, rose from planetary surfaces where they had hidden for eons. But most importantly, a signal began broadcasting on every frequency in the galaxy. It carried a simple message in every known language. "The time of renewal has come. Choose freedom or choose extinction." On worlds throughout Zephyrian space, enslaved populations heard the message and rose in rebellion. The signal somehow carried with it the same genetic triggers that had awakened in Alliance species. Beings who had been oppressed for generations suddenly found themselves with the courage and ability to fight. Back Supreme Admiral Corex watched his empire collapse in real time as reports flooded in from across Zephyrian territory. "This is impossible," he whispered. "A few primitive species cannot destroy an empire that has lasted 10,000 years. Admiral Sunmi's voice crackled over the battlefield communications. "You're right, Admiral. A few primitive species couldn't do this, but we're not primitive anymore, and we're not alone." The Great Cleansing Fleet, the most powerful armada in galactic history, found itself surrounded and outgunned by forces it couldn't understand. Ancient architect weapons, Alliance innovation, and the power of united species fighting for freedom proved unstoppable. But humanity's greatest strength showed itself in victory. Instead of destroying their enemies, they offered something the galaxy had rarely seen. Mercy and Second Chance's Chancellor Myung-ho opened communications with the surviving Zephyrian forces. "Admiral Corex, your empire is finished. Your worlds are in rebellion and your fleets are defeated. But we're not here to destroy you. We're here to offer you the same thing we've offered everyone else. Freedom." The offer was simple. Surrender, face judgment for war crimes, but also receive the chance to rebuild as part of a free galaxy. The Zephyrian military had never encountered such an offer from victorious enemies. Over the following months, the transformation was remarkable. The Zephyrian Empire dissolved, but its people weren't abandoned. Alliance reconstruction teams, led by humans but including former enemies, helped rebuild worlds and establish democratic governments. Former Zephyrian Admiral Corex himself became an unlikely ally. He used his knowledge of imperial military strategies to help liberate remaining slave worlds. "Your species is insane," he told Chancellor Myung-ho during one planning session. "You turn enemies into friends and make it look easy." "It's not easy," Myung-ho replied. "But it's right. And humans have never been good at doing things the easy way." 1 year after the Battle of the Shattered Stars, representatives from over 1,000 worlds gathered on New Geneva Station for the founding of the Galactic Republic. Unlike the old Galactic Council, which had been dominated by powerful species, the Republic was based on principles humanity had brought to the stars: equality, freedom, and the right of every being to determine their own destiny. Elder Hyejin, now the Republic's chief archivist, stood before the assembly to read the final lines of the architect prophecy. "When the catalyst has done its work, when the old corruption has been burned away and new growth begins, then shall the galaxy know peace not through conquest, but through choice." President Dayun, now serving as the Republic's first elected leader, addressed the historic gathering. The elders warned the stars about humanity, and they were right to do so. We changed everything. We brought war, revolution, and chaos. But we also brought something else, hope. She gestured to the assembled representatives. Beings from species that had been enemies for millennia were now working together. This is what the ancient warnings were really about. Not destruction for its own sake, but the destruction of systems that kept beings enslaved. The revolution that freed entire worlds. The chaos that comes when people refuse to accept injustice. The ceremony concluded with something that would have been impossible just a few years earlier. Children from dozens of species played together in the station's parks while their parents worked to build a better galaxy. Human children who could breathe poison and survive in freezing cold played alongside young Zephyrians learning to live without the hatred their parents had been taught. The galaxy was indeed transformed. Ancient trade routes that had been controlled by empires became open to all. Worlds that had been strip-mined by occupying forces were being restored by Alliance technology. Species that had never imagined freedom were building their own governments and choosing their own futures. Admiral Sunmi, now head of the Republic Defense Force, stood in the observation lounge of her flagship and watched ships from 100 worlds working together in space. The elders were right, she murmured to Admiral Jae-sung, who had joined her. Elder Hai-jin walked slowly through the crystal halls of the Great Archive. Her feet made no sound on the glowing floor. She had been keeping the galaxy's memories safe for 3,000 years. Today felt different. Something was calling to her from deep inside the archive. The quantum crystals that held ancient memories were flickering with strange light. They had never done that before. Hee-jin followed the light deeper into the archive than she had ever gone. In the darkest corner, she found a crystal formation that pulsed with urgent energy. When she touched it, visions filled her mind. Words appeared in front of her eyes, carved in the oldest language she knew. The words made her two hearts beat faster with fear. She read aloud in the empty chamber. Beware the young species from the third spiral arm. They who turn fire into tools to fight ice. They who make medicine from poison. They who breathe death and make it into weapons. When they reach for the stars, nothing will be the same. Hee-jin had never seen this warning before. How had it stayed hidden for so long? She kept reading. Each word filled her with growing worry. The prophecy talked about a species that would change everything. They would bring both destruction and new life to the galaxy. The warning was clear. This species was more dangerous than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Far across the galaxy, Captain Dong-su stood on the bridge of his ship. The ship was called New Seoul. He was a simple man from Busan who had always wanted to see the stars. Now, at 42 years old, he was leading humanity's first trip beyond their home solar system. His ship carried 300 people. Most were families who wanted to start new lives on distant worlds. Captain, we're getting a signal, said Lieutenant Park, his communications officer. It's not from Earth. Dong-su felt his heart jump. This was the moment they had all been waiting for and dreading. First contact with alien life. Put it on the main screen, he said, trying to keep his voice calm. The screen filled with the image of a tall, graceful being. It had silver skin and large dark eyes. The alien spoke in musical sounds. Somehow the ship's computer changed the words into Korean. Welcome, newcomers. I am Ambassador Keth of the Galactic Council. We have been watching your species. You seem interesting. Dong-su stepped forward. I am Captain Dong-su of Earth. We come in peace. We want friendship and to learn new things. The alien seemed pleased. Your species shows promise. We invite you to join the galactic community. There is much to learn. There are many worlds where you can make new homes. 3 days later, the New Seoul arrived at Nexus Station. It was a huge space station that served as the galaxy's meeting place. Dong-su had never imagined anything so big. Millions of beings from hundreds of different species lived and worked there together. They seemed to get along well. Ambassador Yuri had arrived earlier on a faster ship. She was Earth's best diplomat. She met Dong-su at the docking area. Her face showed both excitement and worry. Captain, this place is incredible, she said as they walked through halls filled with amazing alien sights and sounds. But something feels wrong. The other species look at us strangely, like we're either very interesting or very dangerous. What have you learned? Dong-su asked. They're giving us worlds to live on, but only the worst ones. Planets with deadly radiation, terrible weather, or poisonous air. Places where other species tried to live but failed and died. Yuri stopped at a window that showed the huge station. They say it's because we're new and have to prove ourselves. But I think there's more to it. That evening, they went to a formal meeting where Yuri would speak to the Galactic Council for the first time. The Great Hall was filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Some looked almost human. Others were so strange that Dongsu could barely understand what he was seeing. Yuri stood at the speaking platform. She looked small compared to many of the alien representatives. "Honored representatives," she began, "humanity comes to you with open hearts and minds. We want to learn, to grow, and to help galactic civilization." Murmurs filled the hall. Some sounded welcoming. Others did not. A huge creature that looked like a walking mountain spoke up. "What can your young species possibly offer? You have barely left your home system. Your technology is simple. Your lifespans are short. Your experience is limited." Yuri smiled. "We offer what we have always given each other. We don't give up when things get hard. We find creative solutions to problems. We may be young, but we learn fast." After the ceremony, Dongsu noticed someone approaching them. It was Elder He-jin, though he didn't know how important she was. She moved slowly. Her ancient body needed technology to help her walk. "Human," she said urgently, "I must speak with you privately." They found a quiet corner of the station's observation deck. He-jin looked out at the stars for a long moment before speaking. "There are warnings about your species in the oldest records," she said. "Prophecies written by civilizations that died millions of years ago. They speak of a dangerous species from your part of space." "Dangerous how?" Yuri asked. "They say you will change everything. When you reach the stars, nothing will ever be the same again." He-jin turned to face them. "The council doesn't believe these old warnings. They think they're just stories. But I have studied the records my whole life. I know truth when I see it." Dongsu frowned. "Are you saying we're some kind of threat?" "I'm saying the universe is about to discover what humanity really is," He-jin replied. "And I'm not sure anyone is ready for that." Over the following days, human ships began arriving at the worlds the council had given them. The planets were indeed harsh beyond imagination. But something strange happened. Instead of failing as expected, human colonists began to succeed. They built cities in frozen wastelands. They grew food in poisonous soil. They found ways to make the impossible work. Back on Nexus Station, reports began coming in that confused and worried the alien administrators. Humans weren't just surviving on these death worlds. They were doing well. Their population was growing. Their settlements were expanding. Somehow they seemed to be enjoying the challenge. Elder He-jin read each report with growing certainty. The ancient warnings were coming true. Humanity had reached the stars. Just as predicted, everything was about to change. The galaxy would never be ready for what was coming. But it was too late to stop now. The humans were here. They were exactly what the prophecies had warned about. They were unstoppable. The attack came without warning on a quiet Tuesday morning across 12 human worlds. The Zephyrian Empire had planned it for months. They wanted to hit every major human settlement at the same time. On New Incheon, Commander Taeho was drinking his morning coffee when the alarms started screaming. Through his office window, he saw the sky fill with enemy ships. Their dark hulls blocked out the pale sun of Creo 7. "All hands to battle stations," he announced over the speaker system. His voice stayed steady despite the fear in his chest. "This is not a drill. The first attack shattered the city's outer defenses like paper. Zephyrian plasma cannons were designed to melt through the strongest armor known to galactic science. But as the smoke cleared, Taeho saw something that made him smile grimly. The humans had built their city using local ice and compressed snow. The plasma beams, designed for metal and ceramic, had simply melted the outer layer. Then it refroze instantly in the brutal cold, creating an even stronger barrier. On the mining world of Redstone, Sergeant Bo-Ra was leading a training exercise when the attack began. Her squad of 20 soldiers found themselves facing a Zephyrian landing force of over 1,000 troops. "What are your orders, Sergeant?" asked Private Kyung. He was barely 18 and shaking with fear. Bo-Ra looked at the massive enemy force advancing across the rocky terrain. Then she looked at her small group of miners turned soldiers. "We make them sorry they came here," she said simply. The Zephyrians had brought equipment designed for normal warfare. Heavy tanks, energy shields, and advanced weapons that had conquered dozens of worlds. But Redstone wasn't a normal battlefield. The human miners had spent months learning every cave, every unstable cliff, every pocket of explosive gas in the planet's crust. Bora split her squad into 3 groups. Team 1 collapsed the northern pass. Team 2, blow up the gas pockets under their main force. Team 3, with me, we're going to show them how humans fight. What followed wasn't a battle in any normal sense. The humans didn't try to match the Zephyrians' firepower. Instead, they turned the planet itself into a weapon. Cave-ins buried entire enemy units. Gas explosions turned Zephyrian tanks into flaming wrecks. When the aliens tried to retreat, they found their landing zones had been filled with human-made explosives built from mining supplies. On Venom Falls, the situation was even more desperate. The Zephyrian fleet had surrounded the planet and was pumping additional poisons into the atmosphere. They were trying to kill the humans even through their protective equipment. Dr. Chang Ho watched his instruments in horror as the poison levels rose beyond anything their filters could handle. "We have maybe 6 hours before the entire colony dies," he reported to Governor Sora. But something unexpected happened. The humans who had been developing immunity to the planet's natural toxins found that the new poisons actually made them stronger. Dr. Chang Ho couldn't explain it, but their blood was adapting in real time. It was turning the Zephyrian biological weapons into food. "The children are asking to go outside," Nurse Yunji reported in amazement. "They say the air smells sweet now." Within hours, humans were working outside without any protection at all. They were breathing the poisonous atmosphere that should have killed them instantly. They began sabotaging Zephyrian equipment on the surface. They moved like ghosts through the toxic mists that gave them perfect cover. But it was on New Busan where the real miracle happened. The smallest human colony, only 3,000 people on a world where gravity was 3 times Earth normal, found itself facing the entire Zephyrian Third Fleet. Admiral Jae Sung had been a merchant captain before the war. He transported goods between the outer colonies. Now he commanded the colony's defense force of 200 volunteers and whatever weapons they could build, from mining equipment and farming tools. "Admiral, they're demanding our surrender," reported Communications Officer Huan. "They say they'll spare the civilians if we give up now." Jae Sung looked around the command center. It was really just the colony's town hall with some military equipment hastily installed. His fleet consisted of 5 converted cargo ships and a dozen mining shuttles. The enemy had brought 300 warships. "Send a message back," he said quietly. "Tell them we're too busy to surrender right now. Maybe they should try again next week." The Battle of New Busan became legendary throughout the galaxy, though it took months for the full story to reach other worlds. The humans didn't try to win through superior firepower or technology. They won through something the Zephyrians had never encountered. They absolutely refused to give up. When Zephyrian Marines landed, they found the colonists had turned every building into a fortress and every street into a trap. The high gravity that was supposed to slow the humans down became their advantage. They had lived and worked in it for months, while the invaders could barely move. Human children who had grown up on New Busan could run and jump in conditions that left adult Zephyrian soldiers gasping for breath. Farmers became snipers, using tools designed for harvesting to pick off enemy troops from impossible distances. But the most shocking development came when the humans began capturing Zephyrian weapons and vehicles. Within days, they had figured out how to operate and modify alien technology that should have taken years to understand. Engineer Yu Jin, who had been working on atmospheric processors before the war, took apart a captured Zephyrian plasma rifle in her workshop. "It's actually pretty simple once you understand the power flow," she explained to the other defenders. "And I think I can make it better." The modified human weapons hit harder and fired faster than the originals. Captured Zephyrian vehicles were rebuilt to work better in high gravity. Most disturbing of all, the humans began using Zephyrian communication equipment to coordinate attacks across multiple worlds. Ambassador Wu Jin, who had been trapped on Nexus Station when the attacks began, found himself becoming the center of something unexpected. Other alien species inspired by human resistance began offering secret support. "Your people fight like nothing we have ever seen," said the Keth representative. It was the same species that had first welcomed humans to the galaxy. They turn every disadvantage into strength. "It gives us hope that the Zephyrians can be stopped." The Valdorians provided intelligence about Zephyrian fleet movements. The hegemony secretly supplied weapons. Even some Zephyrian colonies began sending messages of support. They were tired of their empire's endless wars. After 6 months of fighting, the impossible happened. The mighty Zephyrian Third Fleet, conqueror of dozens of worlds, was forced to retreat from New Busan. 200 humans with improvised weapons had held off 50,000 professional soldiers and hundreds of warships. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Humanity, the newcomer species that had been dismissed as primitive, had fought the galaxy's most powerful military to a standstill. On Nexus Station, Elder He Jin read the battle reports with deep sadness and growing certainty. The ancient prophecy was happening exactly as predicted. "They who make weapons from their very breath," she whispered, remembering the words carved in quantum crystal. The Galactic Council was in emergency session, trying to understand how their carefully ordered universe had turned upside down so quickly. "How did they do it?" demanded Council President Thane. "They have no advanced technology, no military tradition, no strategic advantages." "They have something else," He-Jin said from the observer's gallery. "They have the one thing the galaxy forgot. They refused to lose." The war was far from over, but everything had changed. Humanity had proven they couldn't be destroyed by normal means. More importantly, they had shown other species that the galaxy's great powers weren't invincible. The Zephyrian Empire had awakened something it didn't understand and couldn't control. They had wanted to eliminate a small threat before it could grow. Instead, they had created their own worst nightmare, a species that grew stronger under pressure, a species that turned every attack into a learning experience, a species that refused to accept defeat no matter what the odds. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when humanity stopped trying to fit in and started fighting back.